Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Ever wondered what happens when a Karen with a clipboard meets a homeowner with an ironclad grandfather clause? Brenda thought she could bankrupt me with legal fees and fines, but she ended up losing her job, her reputation, and her house. This is the story of how I let my enemies dig their own grave, and then handed them the shovel. I bought my house about 8 years ago, and it's a bit of an oddball property. The house itself is over 100 years old. It was the original farmhouse that sat on this land back when everything around here was agricultural. My great-uncle owned it, and when he passed, it came to me. By that time, the surrounding farmland had been sold off to developers who built a subdivision around the property in the mid-1980s. Here's where it gets interesting. When those developers bought the land and created the HOA, my great-uncle's property was specifically excluded from the master deed. There's a grandfather clause in the title that exempts my lot and a 10-foot buffer zone around the entire perimeter from any HOA jurisdiction. My great-uncle was smart about it. He made sure his lawyer got it in writing before he'd agreed to sell the surrounding acres. I knew all this when I inherited the place. I had actually reviewed the title documents with a lawyer before I accepted the inheritance because I wanted to understand exactly what I was getting into. The property had some tax implications, and I needed to make sure everything was clean. That's when the lawyer pointed out the HOA exemption. He told me it was pretty rare but completely legal and binding. For the first 7 years I lived here, it was never an issue. I kept to myself, maintained my property, and the HOA left me alone. I think most of the board members from the old days knew about the situation, or at least had enough sense not to poke around where they didn't belong. Then I decided to upgrade my backyard. I work in tech and spend most of my day staring at screens. I'd been wanting to create a relaxation space for years. After getting a decent bonus last year, I finally pulled the trigger. I hired a contractor to install a custom outdoor jacuzzi and built a modern cedar privacy screen around the back patio area. The whole thing cost me about 30 grand, but it was worth it. The jacuzzi was top of the line with LED lights, multiple jets, and a sound system. The cedar screen was beautiful, about 7 feet tall, with horizontal slats that let air flow through while blocking the view from the neighboring yards. I got all the proper permits from the city, had inspections done. Everything was completely above board and up to code. The city inspector who came out actually complimented the work and said it was one of the nicer installations he'd seen in a while. The jacuzzi was finished on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I had the violation notice. The envelope had that official look to it. Thick paper, return address with the HOA management company logo, sent via certified mail. I remember standing in my kitchen reading it and feeling this weird mix of confusion and irritation. The notice claimed my jacuzzi was an unauthorized water structure that violated some code about permanent fixtures. The cedar screen apparently violated the uniform fencing height regulation. They were demanding immediate removal of both. And here's the kicker, they were assessing a fine of $500 per day starting from the date of installation until the violation was corrected. I read it 3 times trying to make sense of it. There had to be some mistake. I wasn't part of the HOA, my property was exempt. But the notice was very specific about my address and even included photos that someone had clearly taken while walking past my house. I called the management company number on the letter, got a receptionist who told me all violation disputes had to be addressed at the monthly board meeting. The next meeting was in 5 days. Those 5 days were strange. I started noticing a woman I didn't recognize doing slow drive-bys past my house. Sometimes she'd stop her car completely and just stare at my property. One time I came home from work and she was standing on the sidewalk taking photos with her phone. When I pulled into my driveway, she got back in her car and left. The board meeting was held at the community center building near the neighborhood entrance. I showed up about 10 minutes early with a folder containing my title documents and the grandfather clause paperwork. I figured this would be a simple misunderstanding that could be cleared up quickly. There were about 30 people in the room when I walked in. Most of them looked like retirees. The board sat at a folding table at the front. 5 people total, with the woman I'd seen taking photos sitting dead center. She had a clipboard in front of her and that smile people get when they think they have power over you. The meeting started with standard neighborhood business. Someone complained about a barking dog. Someone else wanted to discuss the pool hours. Then the woman with the clipboard looked right at me. She introduced herself as the new compliance officer and said she wanted to address a serious violation that was threatening property values in the neighborhood. She pulled out a printed photo of my backyard, taken from some angle that must have required her to really work at it, and held it up for everyone to see. She went on this whole speech about how the neighborhood had standards and regulations that everyone had to follow. She talked about property values and aesthetic cohesion. She made it sound like my jacuzzi was some kind of environmental hazard. I raised my hand and tried to explain that my property wasn't part of the HOA. I started to mention the grandfather clause. She cut me off mid-sentence and actually laughed. She said everyone in this zip code was subject to the board's aesthetic vision. She told me that just because I thought I could do whatever I wanted didn't mean I was above the rules. I tried again to explain about the title documents. She talked right over me and said she didn't have time for excuses. Then she pulled out a printed invoice showing 3 days of fines totaling $1,500. She slid it across the table toward me and said if I didn't tear down the violations by the following Monday, they'd file a lien against my house. The rest of the board just sat there nodding along. A couple of them looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. I left that meeting pretty angry. I'm generally a calm person, but being dismissed like that in front of a room full of people didn't sit well with me. I went home and dug out all my property documents. I made copies of everything. The original deed, the survey from the 1980s showing the exact boundaries of my lot, the master deed for the HOA with the specific exclusion clause, and the grandfather provision. The next morning, I drafted a letter explaining the situation and included copies of all the relevant documents. I sent it via certified mail to the HOA management company and to each board member individually. I kept copies of everything for my records and logged the date and time I sent each letter. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, I got another envelope. This time, it was from a law firm. Not a big fancy one, but one of those local offices that does a bit of everything. The letter was a cease and desist. It demanded I remove the unauthorized structures within 10 days or face legal action. It mentioned the fines again, which were now supposedly up to $5,000. The letter made no mention of the documents I'd sent. It was like they hadn't even looked at them. That's when things started getting weird. Brenda began showing up at my property almost daily. She'd park on the street and just sit there watching my house. Sometimes she'd get out and walk the perimeter of my fence, taking photos from every angle. She was documenting everything. One afternoon, I was working in my home office and heard someone talking loudly outside. I looked out the window and Brenda was on her phone, standing right at my fence line, describing my backyard to someone in detail. She was saying things like the structure was clearly visible from neighboring properties and was creating a public nuisance. Then she escalated. She called the city building inspector and filed a complaint claiming my jacuzzi installation was unpermitted and potentially dangerous. The inspector had to come back out for a second visit. He was pretty annoyed about it because he'd already approved everything. He did his inspection again, found everything in perfect order, and told me off the record that someone was wasting his time with frivolous complaints. I documented everything. I started keeping a log with dates, times, and descriptions of every interaction. I took photos of Brenda taking photos of my property. I saved every letter and email. I recorded the license plate of her car every time she showed up. About 3 weeks after the cease and desist letter, I got notification that the HOA had filed an actual lawsuit against me. They were suing to force compliance with the alleged violations and to recover their legal fees plus all the accumulated fines. That's when I decided it was time to get serious. I hired a real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes and HOA issues. His name doesn't matter, but he came highly recommended and had a reputation for not backing down. Our first meeting lasted about 2 hours. I brought every document I had and walked him through the entire timeline. He looked through the grandfather clause paperwork and started smiling. He asked me if the HOA's lawyers had done a title search. I told him I had no idea. He said it was pretty clear they hadn't, because if they had, they never would have filed the lawsuit. He explained that what I had was incredibly rare. Most grandfather clauses are limited in scope or have expiration dates. Mine was ironclad, the language was clear and unambiguous, my property was completely outside HOA jurisdiction and there was nothing they could do about it. He asked me what I wanted to do. I could have just sent him to court to get the lawsuit dismissed. That would have been the simple route. But I was tired of being harassed. I was tired of Brenda showing up at my property. I was tired of being treated like I was doing something wrong when I'd followed every rule and gotten every permit. So I told him I wanted to let them dig themselves in deeper. I wanted them to spend money on this lawsuit. I wanted them to commit fully before we pulled the rug out. He said he could do that. Over the next month, we let the lawsuit proceed through the normal channels. The HOA's lawyer sent discovery requests. My attorney responded with the bare minimum. They filed motions. We responded appropriately, but didn't show our hand. The whole time, the HOA was racking up legal bills. Brenda's behavior got worse during this time. She apparently took the lawsuit as validation that she was right. She started leaving notes on my door about the ongoing fines. She told my neighbors that I was dragging down property values and that the legal action would force me to comply. A few neighbors actually apologized to me because they thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Then came the day we'd been waiting for. The preliminary hearing was scheduled. This was when both sides would present their basic arguments to the judge and he'd decide if the case had merit to proceed to trial. My attorney filed our counter motion the day before the hearing. It included the full title history, the survey maps, the original master deed with the exclusion clause, and the grandfather provision. He also included something I hadn't thought about, a claim for tortious interference and harassment. He attached my entire documentation log showing Brenda's repeated visits to my property, the photos of her taking photos, the notes she'd left, and the timeline of escalating behavior. The hearing was at the county courthouse downtown. I took the morning off work and met my attorney in the lobby. He seemed confident but told me to stay calm no matter what happened. The HOA showed up with their lawyer and 3 board members, including Brenda. She had a folder that looked like it was bursting with papers. She kept glancing at me with this satisfied look like she thought she'd already won. We went into the courtroom and the judge called the case. The HOA's lawyer stood up first and started to give his opening statement. He talked about how HOA regulations exist to protect property values and maintain community standards. He claimed I had willfully violated clearly established rules and refused to comply despite multiple notices. Then my attorney stood up. He didn't say much. He just asked the judge if he could present some documents for review. The judge agreed. My attorney handed copies to the judge and to the HOA's lawyer. I watched the other lawyer's face as he read through the first few pages. He started flipping faster. Then he stopped and looked up at my attorney, then back down at the papers, then over at Brenda and the other board members. The judge took his time reading everything. The courtroom was completely silent. After about 5 minutes, the judge looked up and asked the HOA's lawyer if he'd done a title search before filing the lawsuit. The lawyer said he'd relied on the HOA's representation that my property was part of the association. The judge asked if he'd verified that information independently. The lawyer admitted he hadn't. The judge was not happy. He asked how a lawyer could file a lawsuit regarding property rights without doing basic due diligence on the title. The HOA's lawyer didn't have a good answer. Then the judge turned to the harassment claim. He asked about the documentation I'd provided. He specifically asked about Brenda's repeated visits to my property and her filing of false complaints with the city inspector. The HOA's lawyer tried to argue that she was just doing her job as compliance officer. The judge asked how investigating a property outside HOA jurisdiction was part of her job. Again, no good answer. The judge made his ruling from the bench. He dismissed the HOA's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile it. He ordered them to pay my attorney's fees in full. He also granted my counterclaim for harassment and awarded damages. The amount wasn't huge, about $10,000, but it was the principle that mattered. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He issued a restraining order preventing any HOA representative from coming onto my property or contacting me directly for any reason. If they had legitimate business, it had to go through attorneys. Brenda's face when the judge announced his ruling was something I'll remember for a long time. She looked like she'd been slapped. She tried to interrupt and the judge told her to be quiet or he'd hold her in contempt. We walked out of that courtroom and I felt lighter than I had in months. My attorney shook my hand and told me it was one of the cleaner victories he'd had in a while. Everything had been so well documented and the law was so clearly on my side that there was never any real doubt about the outcome. The aftermath was interesting. The HOA had to call a special meeting to inform all the residents that they were being hit with a special assessment to cover the legal fees and the damages. Every household in the neighborhood had to pay an extra $200. People were not happy about it. I heard through one of my friendly neighbors that there was a pretty heated meeting where people demanded to know how this had happened. Brenda tried to defend herself, but it didn't go well. Several people pointed out that she'd been warned by other board members to verify the property status before taking action. She'd apparently ignored those warnings because she was so convinced she was right. She resigned from the board 2 weeks later. I heard she moved out of the neighborhood entirely a few months after that. The rest of the board sent me a formal letter of apology. It was actually sincere. They acknowledged that they should have done their research and that I'd been treated unfairly. They assured me they'd updated their records to reflect my property's exempt status and that I wouldn't be contacted again. Once everything settled down, I decided to have a little gathering. Nothing big, just a backyard thing with some neighbors I'd gotten to know over the years. I called it a summer evening get-together, but really it was a celebration. We grilled some food, had some drinks, and yeah, we used the jacuzzi. It was a perfect evening. The water was the perfect temperature, and the jets felt amazing after all the stress of the previous months. At one point, I saw Brenda's replacement on the board walking past my house with her dog. She looked over at the gathering, and I swear I saw her shake her head and smile. Later that week, she actually stopped by to introduce herself properly and assure me that the new board had no interest in repeating past mistakes. The whole experience taught me something important about standing your ground when you know you're right. I could have backed down at any point. I could have removed the jacuzzi and the screen just to avoid the hassle. But I'd done everything correctly and legally. I had the documentation to prove it. And I wasn't going to let someone bully me off my own property just because they had a clipboard and an inflated sense of authority. My property is still that weird little island of independence in the middle of an HOA neighborhood. The jacuzzi is still there, still working perfectly. The cedar screen has weathered beautifully and provides exactly the privacy I wanted. And every time I sink into that hot water and feel the jets working on my shoulders, I think about how much better it feels knowing that nobody can tell me to get rid of it. The water feels warmer when you know it's 100% legal and there's not a single thing anyone can do about it. I kept all the legal documents in a fireproof safe, not because I expect trouble again, but because you never know. The lawyer told me that grandfather clauses like mine are becoming increasingly rare as properties change hands and old protections expire or get negotiated away. Mine is solid and binding for as long as I own this property, and it'll transfer to whoever buys it from me someday. Sometimes I still see neighbors looking over at my place when I'm out in the backyard. Most of them are just curious about the setup. A few have asked me for the contractor's information because they want something similar. I'm always happy to share, though I make sure to mention that they'll need HOA approval first, and I offer a sympathetic smile when they remember that little detail. There's a certain satisfaction in having weathered that storm and come out on top, not because I wanted to beat the HOA or prove someone wrong, but because I defended something that was legitimately mine. The property, the right to improve it as I saw fit, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing you don't have to ask permission to enjoy your own home. The legal fees I had to pay up front were reimbursed by the HOA as part of the judgment, so in the end this whole mess didn't actually cost me anything except time and stress. Well, and the cost of being extremely meticulous about documentation for several months. But that's just who I am anyway. I'm the kind of person who keeps receipts and maintains detailed records. In this case, it paid off. My attorney told me after everything was done that he'd handled probably a dozen HOA disputes in his career, but this was the first one where the homeowner had such clear-cut documentation of being exempt from the HOA entirely. He said most cases involve arguments over whether specific rules apply or whether the HOA followed proper procedure. Having a legal document that just straight up said the HOA had no authority over my property made everything much simpler. Looking back, I'm almost grateful it happened. Not for the stress or the harassment or the lawsuit, obviously, but because it forced me to really understand my property rights and to stand up for them. It gave me confidence that if something like this ever happens again, in any context, I know how to handle it. Document everything, know your rights, don't back down when you're clearly in the right, and get good legal help when you need it. The jacuzzi itself has been amazing. I use it probably 4 times a week, sometimes more in the winter when the cold makes the hot water feel even better. I've had friends over who've used it and they all say the same thing about how nice it is and how much they'd love something similar. Then they remember the HOA rules in their own neighborhoods and get this deflated look. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work as a school janitor. Half my day is spent in the lunchroom emptying the trash cans and sweeping up. At most schools, you get 15+ minutes in between each lunch period to do all the cleaning. At my school, I get less than a full minute, if I'm lucky. Normally, if a trash can isn't full, I just dump one can into another and then tie off that bag when it gets full. It's a lot faster than having to replace every bag every time, and it saves a ton of bags. I also sweep up around the tables, and if I see a big mess under a table, I ask the kids to move their feet and sweep that up too. I do it this way because it's the only way to keep up and keep things clean. If I pulled every bag every time instead of dumping one can into another, not only would I run out of bags halfway through the week, but it would also take way longer. If I only swept under tables when there was no kids sitting there, I would literally never have an opportunity to sweep under tables. Enter the lunch ladies. Most of them are nice, but there's this one older one who is just a miserable human being. She yells at everyone, including the kids, and is just always angry about something. Earlier this week, she yelled at me for dumping one trash can into another instead of pulling the bag. Why she chose today to do this, I don't know, since I'd been doing this every day for the past 3+ years. I know how to do my job and didn't ask her opinion, so I just ignored her, didn't say anything, and kept doing what I was doing. Fast forward an hour or two, and I'm getting a call from my district boss that there was a complaint. The lunch ladies are saying they don't like that I dump cans instead of pulling bags, and they don't like that I sweep under the kids' feet. My boss tells me just stick to cleaning in between lunch periods. I try to explain that that's literally a period of less than a minute and isn't even 1/5 of the amount of time I'd need to do it that way. He says just do it anyway to keep the lunch ladies happy. He's a good dude, but he's just trying to squash complaints and keep them from going further because he doesn't and deal with it. He says from now on, I'm only to empty trash or sweep the floors in between lunches where there's not students in the cafeteria, and also I'm to pull the bags every time. No more dumping cans. Cue malicious compliance. Starting then, I only cleaned in between lunches when there was no kids. Of course, this is literally less than 60 seconds, so I only had time to get to half the trash cans. And since I was replacing every bag instead of dumping cans, each can took longer. I didn't even have time to sweep at all. The trash cans I couldn't get to would fill up and overflow, and the kids don't care and just keep piling trash on top. The floor got more and more covered in trash since I didn't have time to sweep at all. I did this for the rest of the week. The same idiot lunch lady tried to scream at me to go empty the trash when I was standing there on Tuesday, but I explained, I was told by my boss that you guys didn't like me sweeping or emptying trash around the kids, so now I'm only allowed to do that when the cafeteria is empty. I'd love to go get that trash can, but there's kids eating lunch right now, so I'm not allowed. She tried to argue, but I just told her I'm following direct and explicit orders from my boss. There was nothing she could do. When the final lunch ended, I cleaned as much as I could before 2 p.m. and then stopped, as that was my lunchtime and the union requires that we take our lunches at our allotted times. It's optional and zero tolerance for deviation. And after my lunch, I have to go clean classrooms since school is out and classrooms take priority over the cafeteria. End result, the cafeteria never got fully cleaned. When the lunch ladies came in the next day and found it still half filthy, they went through the roof and complained to my boss. He called me in and I explained that I was just follow orders and the lunch ladies were the ones who asked I do things this way. Suffice it to say, I was told to go back to doing it however I thought was best. You want to stick your nose in my business and tell me how to do my job, see how that turns out. Oh, and also, since then, I spent the rest of the week calling them out on all the things they were doing wrong. Previously, I just kept my mouth shut and minded my business, but now we're doing this the way you wanted. Door propped open because it's incredibly hot in the kitchen and you need the airflow? Sorry, that's a security issue. Doors cannot be propped open. Enjoy your heat stroke. Greasy wax paper in the cardboard recycling? Sorry, that can't go in there. Normally, I'd just grab it as I see it, but now I waited till the end of the day and then tell them. They had to pick it all out by hand. They had to stay late instead of leaving and pick it all out. You guys like having the radio playing in the kitchen? Sorry, not allowed. Shut it down. Grumpy lunch lady wants to sneak out early because they finished shutting down their stations. Oh, hey, where are you going, Miss Grumpy? Your shift doesn't end for another 20 minutes. Good thing I let you know, or you might left early, and we all know that would be considered stealing time. The next one is an entitled people story. So I, 21M, have been friends with my best friend, 21F, for 8 years. We initially bonded over having similar crazy home situations with our parents, so our relationship is almost as if we were siblings. However, recently I've been noticing some patterns that I'm not willing to put up with anymore. For starters, we've never been on the same page about finances. I have always been on my own. Paid for my own college, clothes, bills, car, everything. I've been working since I was 14. However, she has always been supported by her aunt for occasional money, nothing substantial or life-changing. Her parents aren't responsible or there for her, and I empathize with her for that because it's the same for me too. She has a summer job, not full-time. As a camp counselor for kids, she wants to be a teacher. She also has been putting off getting her license for years, and doesn't have a car, so anytime we want to hang out or go somewhere, I am always the one driving and often going out of my way to include her, which up until recently I was happy to do. I started noticing years ago when I would complain about my job she would never understand what was fair/unfair in a workplace, or the fatigue of working a full week, so I eventually stopped going to her when I would need to rant about work altogether. This has translated into our relationship now as almost not understanding the value of hard-earned money. For example, I feel that I am always expected to put my card down to buy things when we go to the beach, to pay for a majority of the groceries when we go on a little trip, to drive everyone. And recently when we went out to eat, I put my card down and days later I noticed she didn't pay me back. And when I asked her to, she said eventually and sent me a picture of her empty bank account. I asked her over text if she would please let me know ahead of time if she needed to pay me back later, because we are both broke college students. And I ended up blowing my tire the next day and immediately was looking at the people who owed me money to pay up. She never acknowledged my text. Granted, none of us should have been going out to eat, learned that lesson the hard way, but it bothered me that she didn't acknowledge or at least say sorry/thank you for picking up the bill. Additionally, I had been helping her practice for her driving test. She finally had scheduled a date for it after I had berated her for months to do it, and it happened to be for the second day of my first full-time job post-grad. I allowed her to use my car to take the test because she didn't have anyone else. We were practicing and she was going away the weekend before the test. We both were free Monday, the day before my first day, and she asked to practice that day. I said I wanted the day for myself because I'm about to work for the rest of my life. To which she said, "So what, I'm just not going to practice?" I told her it wasn't my problem that she felt unprepared. We practiced that day anyways because I'm a pushover. But it bothered me that she ignored my boundary and confirmed that she doesn't understand having a real job. Another example was when we went on a trip to her aunt's house for 4th of July this year. We went to the grocery store, and when it was time to pay, I asked how we were going to split the stuff, and she grabbed the stuff she wanted personally, and I paid for the rest. I paid $70 and she paid $20. I was furious. The next morning we went out to grab donuts early in the morning and I paid for the whole group's donuts $50. There was 8 of us and she didn't even offer to chip in. Long story short, moments like these have become more common. Recently she was sick, so I made her a homemade soup with chicken broth that I made, I like to cook, and delivered it to her house. She said thank you, but the next day she texted me that she wished it had more broth. Like what? I've always been transparent with her when I am struggling with money, and I know she doesn't have any either. But I'm beginning to get less willing to go out of my way when I don't get acknowledged or thanked often, and I also feel that she's a big girl and can take charge of these things in her life and become less reliant on me. She has a harder life than most, I will give her that, but so do I. There are times when she will give me gas money or pay for the whole group's dinner, but this is very, very few and far between, and I feel that the friendship is still quite unbalanced. How do I set boundaries without ending the friendship? Is she being entitled? Is this intentional? There are good moments in our friendship, although all of this seems terrible. She has been there for me in other ways and understood me when no one has. What do I do? The next one is an entitled people story. My mother was the solar opposite to my aunt. She worked from the age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job till the age of 26, was constantly stealing from her parents, and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. Didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did, my grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mom and her kids, unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mom would visit her was because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004, and a few months after, my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold and the money split 25% each to my mom and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. In 2010, my mom died after an accident and did not have a current will in place. As she no longer had her business and was renting a house, she didn't have anything of much monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she have passed away, but had told me everything she wanted. The music, the flowers, the coffin color, and even what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colors. So, when she passed, my aunt and Nan took over all the arrangements and tried to undo all the things I'd told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew Mom didn't like, the flowers were all the wrong colors, and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few of the things back to what they were supposed to be. But the coffin wouldn't be changed for some reason, and my Nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my Nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by our aunt that she didn't have any involvement with the writing of the will, and our Nan told us that she changed it so that Mom's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After Mom passed away, my Nan just stopped talking about my mom. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter, but even 5 years after Mom passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about Mom, Nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her crappy kids had it. And if you went to talk to her about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I had suffered a mental breakdown after my mom's death, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear, well, X has had it so much worse. In 2016, my Nan passed away. She had written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral, and it was basically all the same things she had picked out for my mom's funeral, even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral using my mom as the stand-in, but it was obvious that's what she was trying to do. So, after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading, and my aunt kept telling me, oh, it'll be another month before we can do the reading. I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start uni, so it would be a hell of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will and asked what was happening. The solicitor let slip that the will had already been read and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will, and it confirmed what we already knew. The house and all its contents were now my aunt's. This included my granddad's war medals. He fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he had promised them to me before he died, she said, well, unless you have it in writing, you'll have nothing in this house. Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. My heart sank. Clive, not his real name, obviously, was her eldest son and the dictionary definition of a duck-up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing drugs. I knew that the moment that prick had got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000. She had pissed off too many people in our town, so she was going to sell the house and move closer to her daughter, who lives in a big city. An offer was made on the house, and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city. And I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my Nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues. And oh boy, were there. Turns out that the land the house was built on was way too soft for the type of house it was, and it was sinking. It had sunk about 2 centimeters in the 40-plus years my Nan and her granddad had lived there, but the sinking was accelerating to 1 centimeter per year. This meant that within the next 3 years, the house would need some serious work or to be knocked down. The new value of the house? £60,000. The buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy her new house, but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he had trashed every single one he'd ever been given. Someone reported this, and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with her craphead son and her partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she would try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time, as I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to die for having an artard like you," in the middle of a busy street. Someone reported her to the police, and she had an official warning from them and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000 and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home, let's call her Sue, but they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house while my aunt looked for a job and a home to rent. Even with £85,000, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her account. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, Sue and my aunt get into a screaming match, and my aunt said something along the lines of, "I should have aborted you." Sue immediately kicked her out of her house. So, again, there's my aunt, in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last bridge she had is a smoldering wreck. Last anyone has heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get joy out of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. The next story is titled, HOA Takes Legal Action Against Me for Owning a Life-Saving Service Dog They Deemed Illegal. I successfully defended myself in court. I never thought I would need a service dog, but after being diagnosed with a seizure disorder, my life changed. My Great Dane became my companion, my protector, and my savior. He was trained to help me during my seizures, and he never left my side. I named him Max, and he was more than just a pet, he was a lifeline. Max and I loved to fish off the pier near our house. He would sit beside me and watch the water, and I would enjoy the peacefulness of the outdoors. But one day, as we were fishing, disaster struck. I had a seizure and almost fell into the water. Max was there to save me. He grabbed me by the back of my shirt and pulled me to safety. I owed my life to him, and I couldn't imagine going anywhere without him. However, our peaceful life was disrupted when the HOA started harassing me. They claimed that Max was an illegal service dog because he was over their 30-pound weight limit. Despite the fact that he was certified and wore a vest indicating his status, they scheduled a court date to have us removed from the area. I knew I had to fight back. I researched ADA laws and gathered all the necessary documents to prove that Max was a legitimate service animal. I showed up to court with Max by my side, and I was ready to take down the HOA. They tried to argue that Max didn't look like a service dog and that I didn't look disabled, but I didn't let their ignorance get to me. I presented all the evidence, including ADA laws stating that any breed of dog can be a service dog as long as it can perform the necessary tasks. In the end, I won the case. The HOA were ordered to leave me and Max alone, and were warned of the consequences of violating ADA laws. It felt like a major victory for me and other service dog owners who faced discrimination. Max and I were able to enjoy our neighborhood once again. However, the victory was short-lived. A few weeks after the court case, I was walking Max around the neighborhood when I noticed that he was limping. I immediately took him to the vet, and the diagnosis was heartbreaking. Max had torn his ACL and would need surgery. The cost was going to be expensive, but I couldn't let Max suffer. He had saved my life, and I had to save his. I started a GoFundMe page to raise money for Max's surgery. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world donated money, shared the link, and left messages of support. It was amazing to see how much love there was for Max and me. The surgery was a success, and Max was on the road to recovery. However, the HOA was not done with us. They started sending letters again, claiming that Max was a disturbance to the neighborhood and that we were causing problems. I couldn't believe it. After everything we had been through, they still didn't understand the importance of service dogs. This time, I didn't want to go to court. I wanted to solve the issue without getting lawyers involved. So, I invited the members of the HOA to a meeting. I brought Max with me and I showed them how important he was to me. I explained how he had saved my life and how he was more than just a pet. He was a service dog and he deserved to be treated with respect. To my surprise, the members of the HOA were open to hearing my story. They listened to my concerns and my reasons for having Max with me. They even apologized for their previous behavior and promised to be more accommodating in the future. It was a huge relief to know that we could all coexist peacefully. Max and I continued to live in the neighborhood without any issues. We enjoyed our walks, our fishing trips, and our quiet moments together. The support we received during the GoFundMe campaign showed us that there were still people in the world who believed in the power of love and compassion. As time went on, I started to notice that there were more service dogs in the neighborhood. People with disabilities had started to feel more comfortable bringing their dogs with them, knowing that they were protected by the law. It was a small victory, but it was one that made me proud. Years passed, and Max started to age. His fur turned gray, and his movements became slower. I knew that our time together was limited, but I tried not to think about it. Then one day, Max had another seizure. This one was different. It was longer, and he didn't seem to recover as quickly. I knew that something was wrong. I rushed him to the vet, but it was too late. Max had passed away from a heart attack. I was devastated. He had been with me through so much, and I couldn't imagine life without him. I missed his gentle presence, his wagging tail, and his calming energy. But I knew that Max's legacy would live on. He had shown me the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what I believed in, and the love that a dog can give. I started a foundation in Max's name to help other service dogs and their owners. We raised money for dog vests, training, and medical bills. It was a way to honor Max and all that he had done for me. The foundation grew over the years, and I met so many wonderful people and dogs along the way. I even got another service dog, a golden retriever named Lily. She was different from Max, but she was just as loving and loyal. Together, we continued to fight for the rights of service dogs and their owners, spreading the message of love and compassion that Max had taught us. In the end, I knew that Max was always with me, guiding me and protecting me. He had been my hero, my friend, and my family. And I was grateful for every moment we had together. The last story is titled, Entitled Neighbor Wants Her Kids in My Garden. So glad to have found this subreddit because I have a legit crazy neighbor with boundary issues. I, 29F, don't have any kids, but have my younger sister, 16, living with me for around 10 years, and we have a trampoline still in our back garden from when she was younger. Neighbor to the left of me has 4 kids and moved in a year ago. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow started getting really good weather, so the kids have been out playing constantly. Not an issue. They asked if I could let the kids use the trampoline one day, so I was like, sure, but only for a bit because I have friends coming over for some drinks. 7 p.m. comes, I ask them to go home because my 5 friends have shown up and we're gonna be drinking. Cue the crying, they leave the garden upset, but hey, that's not my issue. They've been on it for 3 hours at this point. Their mom pops her head out of her bedroom window and asks if they can stay in the garden longer. No? I'm not your babysitter. She's annoyed, but drops it. Last week, I come home from some shopping and to my surprise, find all 4 of the kids in the garden, plus their younger cousin. Ask them to leave. Tell them they can't just come into my garden without me there, and they didn't even ask. They refuse to leave, so I shout up at their mom and tell her to get them out of the garden. She says, let them play for a bit, you don't even use it. Okay, but still, not your garden? Eventually, we get into an argument and they leave. She's pissed off and shouting, saying I'm being a Karen and I should let them in. I tell her not to ask again because the answer will be no. This happened again the day after, all 4 kids, plus their cousin, waiting till I moved the car from the drive and heading straight into the garden. So, I wake up this morning. I've since put a lock on the trampoline, just a small one on the mesh safety enclosure to stop them opening it up, cause I'm petty as fuck. Plus, it's Saturday. I'm not working today, it's my day off, and I want a long lie. But no, neighbor decides that at 9 a.m. this morning her kids are being fired straight out that house with breakfast bars and a bottle of water, and they head straight into the garden. So I can hear them from my window, I look out and tell them to leave. By the time I get downstairs, Mom has descended from her house and is trying to climb the fence between our gardens, shouting about how I used to let them use it, and she's going to call the police for hitting her kids. Great. You do that. I'll be sure to show them the Ring camera footage, which coincidentally also has footage of your husband picking the lock open so your brats can use the trampoline. So long story short, entitled mother sends her kids into my garden repeatedly even after being told not to, calls police on me for harassment and hitting her kids, and ends up getting her own husband arrested for theft and housebreaking and criminal damage. Suck it, idiot. The next one is an entitled people story. Okay, so I'm going to preface this post by saying that the entrance to my property is a standard driveway through roughly 20 meters of wooded area before the driveway opens up to about the same size as a standard American 2-lane roadway. My home sits about 500 meters back off of the road, and I've sculpted my driveway, as well as a pass in front of my home and a lot of my backyard, into a drift track. We have 2 giant no trespassing signs at the road-facing side of the woods, as well as a speed limit 15 inches sign 10 meters beyond the woods, mainly to remind my friends not to be dickheads on their way in when the track isn't hot. Everything is above board with the county, my homeowner's insurance, and local PD. Now, with that out of the way, I went to the port today to pick up a much-awaited 1997 Nissan Stagea we are building for my mate. As the mate and I are pulling down the drive in the truck, pulling the trailer W/the car on it, my mate yells, "What in the hell is that?" and points off to the corner of the paved part of my property where I have a medium-sized shed which I keep landscaping things like a tractor, golf cart, etc. in. I look over to see the nose of a 2016 to 2017 Mustang stick out of a now-collapsed shed and a guy lying on the pavement next to it. We immediately drove straight over with haste. As we pull up, our EP sits up from his prone position and starts yelling about suing me, calling me an AH, and a bunch of other names. I yelled as loud as I could, "Hey!" Then said, "Who the F are you and what are you doing on my property? Why is your car in my shed?" To which EP responds, "I'm going to sue you as your racetrack isn't safe and you owe me a new car." By this point, my mate is already on the phone W/911 and has hopped back into the truck. I explained to EP that he's trespassing and in fact he owes me a shed and probably a few other things, including a tractor. EP starts to limp toward me, screaming that he's going to own my property and I won't have a pot to piss in when he's done with me. I decide to just get back into the truck and wait on the police. Roughly 15 minutes later, 2 police cars come screaming down my drive with their lights and sirens on and see EP beating on the window of my truck with his hands. PD immediately handcuff him and then my mate and I step out of the truck. EP told police that he has been driving past my property all summer and hearing engines and tires squelching from the roadway and finally decided that he was going to run a few laps today. That he saw the no trespassing signs but didn't think they were there for him. Who else would they be there for, though? EP was arrested for malicious destruction of property. A tow company in town came and impounded his vehicle, and I was finally able to see that the entire shed and everything in it is a total loss. EP did leave in an ambulance, though he should be fine. Insurance is going to have a field day with this one. I'd just like to add that that particular shed sits 25 feet off of the paved surface. I really hope next year doesn't have as many stressful events as this one. I'm starting by adding a gate with a code to enter the property this week. It's unfortunate that I have to go to these lengths, but I guess some people just can't read signs or understand the concept of private property. As a side note, I'm grateful that my mate and I were able to catch this guy in the act before he caused any more damage to my property or himself. It's also a good reminder to always be vigilant and keep an eye out for any unusual activity on your property. In any case, I'm just glad that no one was seriously injured, and I hope that this incident serves as a warning to anyone else who might be thinking of trespassing on my property. As for me, I'll be working with my insurance company to figure out how to replace the shed and its contents, and I'll be taking steps to improve the security of my property to prevent any further incidents like this from happening in the future. Overall, it's been a stressful day, but I'm grateful for my mate's quick thinking and the prompt response of the police. Here's hoping that things calm down from here on out. In my opinion, this story highlights the importance of respecting private property and following posted signs. It's unfortunate that the EP in this story didn't seem to understand this basic principle and caused significant damage to the property as a result. It's also interesting to see how the property owner was able to handle the situation calmly and responsibly by calling the police and working with their insurance company to address the damage. Overall, it's a cautionary tale that serves as a reminder of the importance of being mindful of others' property and the consequences of ignoring posted signs. The next story is titled, HOA claims I must join them and threatens to fine me if I don't remove my illegal pool. I had always loved my quiet and peaceful neighborhood where I had lived with my family for the past 15 years. We had a beautiful home with a big yard and a pool that my 2 daughters loved. But that peace was about to be shattered when the HOA was formed. The HOA was something that I had been against from the beginning, but more than enough people voted for it to form. I refused to sign the papers that would make my family and I join them because I did not agree with their rules. The HOA had unreasonable rules that would cause a lot of heartbreak and expenses for my family and me. One of the rules was that we could not have any large dogs, which was ridiculous because we had 2 beloved dogs that were part of our family. The next rule was that no houses could have in-ground pools, which was even more unreasonable because we had a pool that we had installed before the HOA was formed. The third issue was that our home was not aligned with the rules and regulations they were putting in place for the aesthetics of the neighborhood. At first, I thought I could reason with the HOA and find a compromise, but it was clear that they were unwilling to budge. They gave everyone 3 months to fix all the violations, but it would be unreasonably expensive. I was determined to find a good lawyer and fight the violations, especially the ones regarding the pool and dogs, since this was stuff that I had before the HOA. With extensive research, I was able to find a lawyer that specialized in HOA cases. We went through all the regulations and found that some of them were not even legal, and they could not force us to make the changes they were demanding. We were able to present our case and win against the HOA, but the victory was not easy. The HOA members were not happy about losing the case, and they were angry with me for taking them to court. The tension between us grew, and things started to get ugly. I received threatening letters from the HOA members, and they even went as far as vandalizing my home. I was scared for my family's safety, and I knew I had to do something. I hired a security company to install cameras around my property and hired a lawyer to help me file a restraining order against the HOA members who had been threatening me. The legal battle was long and exhausting, but I finally won, and the HOA members were ordered to stay away from me and my family. After the victory, the neighborhood was still divided, and there was still a sense of animosity towards me and my family. I knew that I had to find a way to bring the community together, and I came up with an idea. I decided to host a neighborhood block party at my home, where everyone could come together and celebrate our victory. I invited all the neighbors, including the HOA members, hoping that we could put the past behind us and move forward. At first, the party was going well, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. But as the night progressed, tensions began to rise, and things quickly spiraled out of control. The HOA members had too much to drink, and they began to cause trouble, insulting me and my family, and causing damage to our property. It was a chaotic scene, and I knew that I had to take action to protect my family and my home. I called the police, and they arrived on the scene quickly, arresting the HOA members responsible for the damage and disturbances. The neighborhood was in shock, and it was clear that things were not going to be the same again. The aftermath of the block party was a difficult time for my family and me. We were shaken up by the events that had transpired, and we felt more isolated than ever before. But I refused to give up on our community. I continued to reach out to my neighbors, hoping to rebuild the relationships that had been damaged. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. My neighbors who had previously supported the HOA began to see the flaws in their reasoning and apologized for their actions. We began to work together to create a new set of rules for the neighborhood, ones that were fair and reasonable for everyone. In the end, we were able to come to a compromise that satisfied both sides. We were able to keep our pool and our dogs, but we also agreed to some minor changes that would help improve the appearance of the neighborhood. We all learned an important lesson about the importance of compromise and communication. Update. It's been a few years since the HOA debacle, and I'm happy to say that the neighborhood has become a much more harmonious place. We've all learned to respect each other's differences and work together to create a community that we can all be proud of. Our block parties are now a regular occurrence, and they're a great opportunity for us all to come together and celebrate our community. We've even started a neighborhood watch program to help keep our streets safe. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized that it was a difficult time, but it was also a valuable lesson. It taught me the importance of standing up for what I believe in, even when it's not easy, and it showed me that sometimes even the most contentious conflicts can be resolved through communication and compromise. I'm proud to be a member of this community, and I'm grateful to my neighbors for working with me to create a better, more welcoming place to call home. In my opinion, this story is a great example of how conflict can arise in even the most peaceful of neighborhoods. It's understandable that people want to preserve the appearance of their community, but sometimes the rules put in place can seem arbitrary and unfair. I admire the protagonist for standing up for what they believe in, even when it wasn't easy, and for finding a way to bring the community back together in the end. It's a reminder that compromise and communication are key to resolving conflicts and building a better community. The next story is titled, "My Mom Feels Entitled to My Inheritance Money. She wants to use it to put a down payment on a house." I only found out about it 6 years later because I looked into a cabinet in our house and did some research. I, 24F, found out earlier this year that I was supposed to receive around $160,000 in inheritance money when my father passed away. I found out by looking into a cabinet in our house. I was compelled to do so because my mother acts rich or poor whenever it suits her and exhibits other strange behavior. I found a letter that was addressed specifically to me from the life insurance company that had my inheritance. All I needed to do was submit some paperwork, and they'd give me a check. I'm not sure how, but my mother somehow submitted documents for me and even cashed the check that was in my name. I'm also not sure why she felt entitled to it when she got $500K in inheritance herself. When I confronted her about it, she obviously did not take it well. She was very adamant that it's her money, until I informed her that after I found the documents, I called the life insurance company and received photocopies of the check, the submitted documents, etc. After I told her that, she tried negotiating with me, stating that she can give me $10,000 to start with, and then $2,000 every month. I said no. I said she will guilt me into delaying her payments if we go that route. She tells me she will be homeless if I get all the money at once. I eventually make her show me her bank statements. As far as I know, she has around $330,000. In addition, she's been making 6 figures with her job for the past 3 years. Homeless, my ass. I told her I need a good amount of money if I want to have any chance of moving out. I wanted to move out with my friend, but my mom took way too long to give me any money. I received $50,000 from her. Like a week or so later, she started asking if she could borrow $20,000 for a month. She said she needs it in her bank account so that the lender can approve of the condo or house she wants to buy. She asked if I will be okay, and I stupidly told her that I'd be getting grants from school too. She then wanted to borrow $20K on top of the grant money by passive-aggressively mentioning it whenever she could. A few weeks later, she forced me to go with her to the bank to withdraw $20,000. This was on October 3rd. On November 23rd, I asked her to give me $2,000. I told her it's been almost 2 months and I want a portion of it back, via text. She gives me the silent treatment, in text and in person. The next day I try calling her. She starts crying hysterically, saying, "I knew I shouldn't have trusted you with money." "What are you doing? Drugs? Are you gambling? Why are you so mean? You ruined my holiday. You've ruined my life. You're abnormal. You're just doing this because you're behind in your life and you're desperate. You don't have utilities to pay for. I spent so much money on food the past month." I'm not exaggerating when I say I've never told her to buy me food or make me food, but she always uses it as a form of guilt. A couple of days later, we have a 4-hour argument. During this argument, I was so disgusted with her behavior that I told her that I want nothing to do with her. A couple of days after that, to my surprise, she came into my room and asked me to hug her. She started crying and said that she just suppresses her thoughts and feelings. She said she'll give me $500,000 now and then $500,000 on December 22nd. What the hell? I swallowed my anger for a couple of days, but then I could no longer hold it in. I wasn't giving her the silent treatment, but I wasn't looking at her or initiating any form of talking. She noticed this and started asking what's wrong. She said, "It's the money, isn't it?" and then repeated the same things she did last time. "Are you gambling? You have no utilities, etc." And again, she made it very clear that she wants to buy a condo or a house. I just can't remember which. I told her I'm mad at her because you told me you needed $20K for a month. It's been over 2 months and now you're still not giving it, so you lied. After this, she started acting like she was about to cry, and then she left the house. She then transferred another $500,000. I haven't talked to her since. It infuriates me that she thinks she's entitled to this money. Why do you need a house? You're getting old and you're single. Secondly, not only was this money only in your account in the first place because you committed fraud, but now I let you borrow money and you're going to treat it like it's an allowance. It's my money, legally! Get over it! You already got $500,000 before you took my money. Since I was 18, I've been working minimum wage jobs. She's made it so clear as day that she thinks her needs are way above mine. I don't have utilities, I don't have a career yet, so I'm less important. Even if that's factually true, I'm your child and that money is legally mine. Also, I just want to share this example of her behavior that I just remembered. When I was 19, I was working at a tutoring place in addition to a restaurant while taking 16 units in college with no car. I was leaving the house one day to go get a haircut. My mom then asked me, "Where are you going?" I told her I'm going to get a haircut. She then says, verbatim, "Really? You're supposed to be using that money to help me." That's how entitled she is. At this point, she received $660,000, while her child, who is a full-time student with 2 jobs and no car, is not important enough to use the money they earned from their job to get a haircut. I'm so mad, and I just have a huge problem with getting this taken care of because I hate making people uncomfortable. This is also why I usually cannot blindside a person by randomly bringing an issue up. I usually have to text them first, but I'm starting to think that that's never a good idea. Ugh. In my opinion, this story is a sad example of how greed and entitlement can poison even the closest family relationships. It's disappointing to see how the mother in this story is willing to go to such lengths to take money that is rightfully her daughter's. It's also unfortunate to see how the daughter is struggling to assert her own rights in this situation. Hopefully, they can find a way to resolve this issue and repair their relationship in the process. The next story is titled, I take an entitled woman's cart full of groceries. I'm a man in my 50s and I am at Walmart. I hear a girl in her 20s who works at the store nicely say, "Excuse me, ladies." I see 2 entitled women in their 40s talking in front of the doors that the workers use to restock the store. The entitled women look at the worker with the disdain of royalty being interrupted by a filthy peasant. The worker, with her empty supply cart, again tells the entitled women that she needs to get through. Again, the entitled women blow her off with pursed lips and a dirty look. Now, I have a particular sensitivity to people mistreating workers, and these women have disrupted my delicate sensibilities. I walk past the entitled women, snagging one of the carts full of groceries, and I take off. It takes them a moment to notice before they pursue me. I quickly traverse the back aisle and turn the corner towards the front of the store. One of the entitled women tries to pull the cart away from me, but I make it all the way to the front of the store before letting go. I make a clean getaway and go back to get my cart. Next to the restock doors is the other woman's cart. Now, before you call me the a-hole, I'm fully aware, but these people needed to be taught a lesson, and I'm just the one compelled to step up. I grab the cart and head off to the camping section. I take the cold stuff from the cart. I needed milk and eggs anyway, so bonus. Later I felt bad that some Walmart worker would have to restock the cart from the camping section. When I went back, the cart was gone. This happened like a year ago and I didn't think much about it. The other day I was at a restaurant with my extended family. One of the waitresses kept looking at me. It took me a while to put it together. When she walked past, I said, "Didn't you used to work at Walmart?" She got excited and exclaimed that she thought it was me. I had a haircut and lost some weight since then. She filled me in on the aftermath. The ladies complained to the manager that a guy tried to steal their stuff for no reason. The manager figured there was more to the story. The entitled women wanted the manager to find me and have me arrested. The worker girl told her what really happened, and it has since become store folklore. I told her I posted the story in Am I the A-hole and got voted the A-hole. She said, "You're not an a-hole, you are a legend." My sister told her another similar story from when we were kids, but I'll save that one for another day. In my opinion, the story depicts a situation where someone takes a stand against entitled behavior towards a store worker. While the approach of taking someone else's cart may seem controversial, it's clear that the intention was to teach a lesson rather than harm the entitled women. The story also highlights the impact of one's actions and how it can create a ripple effect that leads to unintended consequences. Overall, the story serves as a reminder to treat others with respect, regardless of their social status or profession. The next story is titled, Don't Cut in Front of a Parent with Their Child, and Then Ask Us to Take Your Photo. We lived in Japan for 2 fantastic years, and one of the things my kids loved to do was go to Universal Studios Japan, particularly the Sanrio area. The kids couldn't get enough of Hello Kitty. Apparently, neither could grown-ass adults. Midday at the park, they dress up some poor soul as Hello Kitty to come out and greet the horde of fans. That day, there were probably 100+ people surrounding the mascot. Well, my kids wanted a picture with the huge furry feline, so I sighed, got in the back of the line, and patiently waited. We were finally next in line when a middle-aged woman dressed in cat attire cut in front of my 6-year-old and me. We were shocked and didn't immediately react. Was this grown-up seriously cutting in front of a line of children? Then, before I had a chance to say anything, she turned around and asked me to take her picture with Hello Kitty. I could hear a chorus of grumbling behind us. At this point, I was ready to throw her iPhone into the fountain, but I thought for a second, smiled, and agreed. I took multiple pictures in portrait and landscape modes, each time coaching her for the cutest poses. A few people behind us were gleefully watching over my shoulder as I either put my finger over her face or cut her head off every single photo. The middle-aged cat lady thanked me and left so she could check the photos away from the crowd. We took our photos with the cat. They turned out great. And as we walked away, we saw the lady angrily scrolling through her photos. The mascot's allotted time was also up about that time, so she didn't have a chance to go back and retake her photos. In my opinion, the story showcases an instance of selfish behavior in a public place, where a middle-aged woman cuts in line and then asks for a favor from the person she cut in front of. It is interesting to see how the protagonist of the story handles the situation with patience, and even manages to get a bit of revenge with the pictures. The story also highlights the popularity of Hello Kitty, not just among kids, but also adults. Overall, it's a relatable and entertaining story. The last story is titled "A Big Group Thinks They Own the Forest Because They Come All the Time." A few months ago, towards the end of the season in this area, I went camping with my friends. We were 3 women. The spot we chose was on a cliff with a great view of a canyon and the creek at the bottom. The area allows dispersed camping, and there are very few spots with that view, and it's first come, first serve. When we arrived, only one spot was left, with the view hidden behind trees but only a few feet away. The view could only be accessed by walking straight through our camp. I think there are other spots you can hike to without going through a campsite. On our first night there, a couple, 2 men, walked into our camp saying they wanted to see the view. I wasn't super comfortable because you can't trust a stranger in a forest, and they were in our space, but they were only there for a few minutes and left. The next day, we went to watch the sunset on the cliff and had left all our stuff lying around camp when we started hearing cars, dogs, voices, and screaming kids. 2 cars pulled up to our camp and walked right in, making themselves comfortable. We ran back to see all of our space was completely invaded. Kids were under our tarp and running around the tent poles, people around our fire, etc. We had a small puppy with us that was terrified of the new dog, but these people didn't care. A woman explained that they live nearby and love coming to see the view. I was in absolute shock at the disrespect. Everyone is allowed to enjoy nature, and it was a public spot, but you have to respect if someone is there first. At least have the decency to ask. As they were leaving well after sunset, the same woman said they'd be coming later that night to see the stars. My friends were so angry, and I was still in shock. As they were loading their car, I ran up to them and said the first thing that came to mind. I asked one of the men, "Hey, when you come back later, are you planning on bringing the kids?" Man, "I'm not sure. Why is that?" Me, "Well, the thing is, we're out here to do heavy drugs. We're starting in a few minutes and things might get pretty wild and I wouldn't want to expose children to that. You as adults might be able to handle it, but I don't know what will happen. I don't do any drugs and only drink occasionally." They never came back, thank God, and hopefully they learned something about respecting people's space. In my opinion, this story highlights the importance of respecting others' personal space and boundaries, especially in public areas like camping grounds. It's disappointing to see that some people feel entitled to invade others' space just because they have frequented the area before. The protagonist's response to the situation was bold and creative, and it's satisfying to see that it worked in deterring the group from returning. Overall, this story serves as a reminder to always be respectful of others and their space, even in public places.
The next one is an entitled people story. So I used to work as a cashier in a supermarket. This story took place on my 4th day at work there, and my 2nd day working at a cash on my own without a supervisor sitting next to me, teaching me the ropes. Yes, I had 2 days of training. I'm sure most of you will figure out in which country I live for the following explanation. It'll become relevant later. Supermarkets in my country are a zoo on a regular day. However, Thursdays and Fridays are absolute mayhem at the store and are a special kind of hell. Fridays, the store closes 2 hours before sundown, as do most stores in the country. During winter, this means around 2 o'clock, and in summer, closer to 4:30. People get crazy on Fridays trying to get all their shopping done and get home in time to cook dinner. If you can avoid coming to the store on Friday, please do so at all costs. I always told people after this day. The reason Thursdays are hell is because we get all the customers who don't want to come on Friday. Now, this was early evening on a Thursday at a time when the store is absolutely jam-packed. We had 10 checkout lines open, and every line had at least 6 to 7 people in line. Basically, if you're stuck with a slow cashier, there is nowhere else to go unless you have 10 items or less. Everything is going well until I get a customer with 2 shopping carts full of items, mostly non-perishable items. And these are the large carts you find around big stores in the US, like Walmart. I found out later he buys this for a community center in his neighborhood, and he fills up their party twice a year. Nice guy. He greeted me very politely and then said the most dreaded words I could have heard that night. This will be a delivery. Just a quick break from the story to explain why this was so dreaded, especially on a day like today. When we get a delivery, the cashier would call a helper from the store to help bag the groceries. Usually people do their own bagging. The bags would then be placed in plastic containers, and containers would then be placed on top of each other and taken to the back fridge until delivery. A regular delivery is usually between 3 to 5 crates. Each crate has a number, which then I have to input all of them into the computer along with correct delivery address and phone number, and print out with the receipt and place copies in the crates. Even for a small delivery, this always takes extra time. Back to the story. This guy has 2 full carts and wants a delivery. I say, sure, no problem. Then I turn to everyone else in line and let them know that this is a delivery and it will take just a bit longer than usual, and apologize for any delay this may cause. We always do this so customers will be aware of the delay and can move to another cash if they are in a hurry. This is when the whole line groans simultaneously. I don't blame them, there was nowhere else to go. I could see every one of them craning their necks to check out other lines, and they all decided to stay, so I started scanning as fast as I can. I'm pretty good with numbers, so even though it's my 4th day, I remember many of the codes and things are moving rather quickly. I get to a point where the bagger can't keep up with all the items, and the area to the left of me, where I place all the scanned items, is just a mountain of cans and bags of chips and whatnot. I can't even scan another item because they're falling back onto my scale. At this point I stop and ask if he wants help bagging. The customer and the bagger are both appreciative, and I help bag groceries for a few minutes, just enough to clear some space so I can continue scanning items. This happens every few minutes. It gets full, I stop to help, clear some space, and keep going. This is where the Karen comes into play. She's maybe early 40s, long brown hair, and looks nothing like a Karen. Except for the way she was standing, with one hand on a hip that extended so far to the side I wasn't sure how she's still standing. She's in my line, about 5 to 6 people in front of her still. This is the conversation that follows. Karen: hello, what are you doing? Me, not answering because I didn't think she was talking to me. I keep scanning. Karen: excuse me? What kind of a cashier are you? Why aren't you doing your job? Stop being lazy and do your job, she screams at the top of her lungs. Me: I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm just trying to... Karen: that's not your job, you are a cashier. Do your job. Do your job. I realize now, after reading so many Reddit stories, that this would have been a perfect chance for some malicious compliance. I'm sure some of you hope that I did just what Karen wanted. Too bad I didn't know about it then, or that it was only my 4th day on the job. That's not what happened, although I dream sometimes that I did just that. Sit back and sip my coffee until the space clears for more scanned items. You know, be a cashier next time. Me: I'm just helping to move things along faster. If this is a problem, or if you're in a hurry, feel free to move to another line. I'm sure another cashier will be more than happy to serve you. I may sound like I'm the a-hole with this line, but I said it really nicely, not sarcastic at all. Obviously that didn't help, lol. Karen, not listening anyway and having none of it: just do your damn job! You are a cashier. What is wrong with you? Are you stupid? You should be fired. I stop listening at this point and don't answer, as I'm still helping to bag and scan as fast as possible, knowing it's not gonna help anyway. However, I see one of my managers, let's call him Joe, walk up to Karen. Joe is great, by the way, always helping the workers. Joe: what seems to be the problem? Karen, still yelling: your cashier is awful. She's lazy and she is not doing her job. You should fire her. Tell her to do her job. She's not doing her job. She repeated that a few times like a broken record. Joe looks over at me for a second, understands exactly what is happening, turns to Karen and says, can't you see she's trying to help? She's trying to make this go so much faster. Now, Karen starts screaming words, I'm assuming, but I couldn't really make them out. She was practically foaming at the mouth. Joe tries to calm her down by explaining, or trying to, how me bagging items is actually helping, and this makes Karen even more irate, if you can believe it. Spit flying from her mouth, arms flailing, screaming like a banshee. Suddenly, I notice an older woman, nice old lady, must have been around 80 years old, trying to get Karen's attention by tapping her on the shoulder. It takes a few tries, but she finally gets her attention and spins her around by her shoulder. NOL. Hey, Karen? Karen? Excuse me? Karen! Karen. What? NOL. Your daughter is crying. This is when the entire store seemed to have stopped talking all at once, like someone pressed mute and turned off the volume. The sea of people in front of me parts a bit, and we all look down and see a little girl who couldn't have been older than 4, clutching her mother's thighs, bawling her eyes out, snot coming out of everywhere, hyperventilating. This girl was terrified, and I can't blame her. Seeing her mother going off like that must have been terrifying, and she has no idea what's happening. She's in a huge store where she knows no one, and she's practically invisible. This silence lasted an entire 2 seconds because that's when Karen started yelling at Joe. Karen. Look what you did! You and your stupid lazy cashier made my daughter cry! And a bunch of other crazy sounds that were perhaps supposed to be words. Things happened in slow motion for the next few seconds. She starts to swing towards Joe. Joe's not a big guy, but he's bigger than Karen, that's for sure, and he's not easily intimidated. Not his first Karen. She would have decked him right in the face if the NOL hadn't grabbed her in a bear hug to stop her. Yes, she did. I had to pick up my jaw off the floor. At that point, other customers got involved, trying to peel off the NOL from Karen and stop Karen from trying to kill Joe, and from Joe trying to kill Karen because he was fuming by then. At this point, I saw mall security storm the castle. Our store was inside a mall, and the sea of people just surrounded Karen, and I couldn't really see much of anything anymore. Kind of like football players when there's a fumble and they all jump on the ball. By the sound of yelling getting farther and farther away, I figured Karen was being led either to the back office or to the mall security office, mall jail. This entire time this is happening, I'm still bagging and scanning items, and I'm about halfway through this customer's purchase. I finish up with him with no more problems. He was very nice and thanked me profusely for helping with the bags, even though technically it wasn't part of my job. He said I was the fastest and nicest cashier he had ever had the pleasure of meeting. I was just happy to help. No one else in my line complained. I actually got compliments from people about keeping my composure. Apparently many cashiers in my country think it's okay to yell at customers and just be plain nasty. I worked in customer service for many years prior, and I've never yelled at a customer, even if they deserved it. Once the rush died down a bit, I went for a break. I met another employee in the back room, and I started to tell him of what just happened when he cut me off. She was yelling at you? I heard that. Well, everyone heard that, but I had no idea what the fuck was happening. He told me that police was called and Karen escorted out of the store and the mall in handcuffs. I filled him in on everything and we spent the next 30 minutes laughing. I don't know what happened with the child. I'm assuming they called another family member to pick her up. I also don't know what happened with Karen after that, since I ended up working there for another year and I never saw her again. Hopefully she learned to do her grocery shopping on Tuesday/Wednesday, or was possibly in prison or house arrest. This was the first Karen I had the displeasure of meeting while working at that store, but definitely not the last. To those of you who read the entire story, thank you for sticking with me through to the end. I hope it was worth it and you got some sense of pleasure or justice from the end result. I'll work on my writing skills so the next story I may write, that may be long as well, will be easy and entertaining to read. The last story is titled, When I Was Away, My Neighbor Discarded My Classic Car Valued at $525,000. I've always lived in the same neighborhood and have seen all kinds of neighbors come and go. I've even had to deal with some Karen types in the past, so when Amy moved in next door, I was wary. However, she was always pleasant to me, and I thought I'd hit the neighbor jackpot. Amy would always say hello and even bring over baked goods once in a while. However, she had a reputation for being mean to everyone else in the neighborhood. One day I found myself in a bit of a predicament. My job required me to travel out of town regularly, and I had 3 cats and a dog that I needed to take care of. Putting them up and boarding each time was going to be expensive, and I didn't want them to be stuck in cages all day. That's when Amy offered to pet sit for me. I hesitated at first, but after seeing how great she was with her own dog, I decided to give her a chance. At first, everything was going smoothly. Amy seemed to genuinely love animals, and my pets seemed to enjoy her company. I paid her well for the job, and it was still cheaper than sending them to a boarding facility. Plus, it was a win-win situation. My pets were happy, and Amy got to make some extra cash. However, things took a turn for the worse when I came back from a trip and found my vintage 1967 Shelby GT500 missing from the garage. I couldn't believe it. I had spent years working on that car, and it was worth over $500,000. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. I had given Amy the key to my garage, and she must have used it to sell my car and parts to make some quick cash. I was furious and immediately confronted Amy, demanding an explanation for her actions. She was defensive at first, but then she admitted to selling my car and parts. She claimed that she deserved the money for pet sitting and other things she had done for me. I was livid, and my anger escalated when she refused to return the car and the parts to me. I knew I had to take legal action, but I was also concerned that I might not be able to recover my car. However, with the help of the police and the court, we were able to track down the car and get it back. The parts, however, were long gone. During the court proceedings, I found out that Amy had a history of financial problems and had even declared bankruptcy in the past. It all started to make sense why she had been so desperate for money. I couldn't believe that I had trusted her with my pets and garage key, and that she had taken advantage of me in such a terrible way. After the case was over, I thought that was the end of it. However, a few weeks later, I received a call from the police. They had found out that Amy had been involved in a car theft ring and had used my car as a way to gain the trust of other car owners in the area. She had even attempted to sell my car to a buyer who had been suspicious and had tipped off the police. Not only had Amy stolen my car and parts, but she had also been using it to commit other crimes. It was a nightmare scenario that I never could have imagined. I felt violated, and it took me a long time to feel safe in my own home again. In the end, I was glad that justice was served and Amy was sentenced to a long prison term for her crimes. However, the experience left me with a sense of paranoia and a distrust of people that I never had before. I realized that sometimes even the people who seem the nicest on the surface can turn out to be the worst. After that experience, I made sure to install cameras all around my property, and I became extra careful about who I let into my home. I also started volunteering with local organizations that help victims of financial scams and other crimes so that I could help others who had been through similar experiences. However, just when I thought I had put the whole ordeal behind me, I received another shocking call from the police. They informed me that they had found evidence that Amy had been planning to break into my home and rob me while I was away on my next trip. The thought of what could have happened if the police hadn't caught her in time makes me sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe that I had been so naive to trust her in the first place. The experience changed me in ways that I never could have imagined. It made me more vigilant, more cautious, and more aware of the dangers that can lurk in even the most unexpected places. However, it also gave me a new sense of purpose and a drive to help others who have been through similar experiences. In the end, I was able to recover my car and get justice for the crimes that were committed against me. However, the emotional toll of the experience will stay with me for a long time to come. I learned the hard way that you can never be too careful, and that sometimes the people you least expect can be the most dangerous.
The next one is an entitled people story.
In the late 90s, I was able, with the help of a family member, to get a job working at Macy's Herald Square. For this job, I was allowed to wear jeans and tops of the brand I was working for as a specialist, otherwise it was business attire. On this particular day, I was there for orientation, and we were given a lunch break to which I went walking around. I was 18, and having family working there, I wanted to do my best to look the part. So, I called my mother, and she said, walk around, pick what you like, and when I get off work, I'll buy it. So, I go look at suits, got some fitted, no problem. Problem comes when I go to the shoe department. I'm looking at all the shoes, and I'm overwhelmed. Lots of very expensive shoes and sneakers and whatnot. I'm looking for someone to help me, but to no avail. I see a salesman and I ask him for help, and he ignores me. So a manager sees me and asked if I needed help. I said yes, I would like to see these shoes at my size. I tried them on and said thanks, I'll be by later. As I walk away, I hear the manager ask the salesman why he didn't help me, and he said I knew he wasn't going to buy anything. So I finished my lunch break and go about my day. Finished orientation and waited for my mother to arrive. We got the suits and were walking towards the shoe department. When this same guy walks up to my mother and says, "Hello, may I help you?" she's about to respond when I said, "No, we don't need your help. Bring me the manager who helped me before." My mom bought me 4 pairs of shoes. 2 being Coach because she had this obsession with the brand at the time. It came out to over $1,000 for shoes, and managers don't get commission. I asked the manager if he knew why I asked for him. He said, "Yes, I do." I told him I start working here tomorrow, so I'll make sure to come by and show you my shoes with the suit. He said, make sure to show him, the salesman, as well, since he missed out on the commission.
The first story is titled, HOA Karen Pushed My Disabled Kid into Her Pool. Calls 911 for trespassing on her property. Moving to a new neighborhood can be both an exciting and nerve-wracking experience. As a mother, I was looking forward to raising my son in a peaceful and safe community. Little did I know that the peacefulness would be short-lived, as we were about to cross paths with a neighbor who would change our lives forever. We had just moved into our new home, and my son, who is 9 years old and nonverbal, was eager to explore the backyard. He loved spending time outside and kicking a ball around, so I felt comfortable allowing him to play while I made dinner. That's when I met her, our next-door neighbor, the president of the HOA board. She was friendly at first, but when she learned that my son had autism, her attitude changed. She went on a tirade about how people like us shouldn't be allowed to live in the neighborhood, and she even tried to change the HOA rules to keep us out. As a mother, it broke my heart to see the way she treated my son, who was innocent and just wanted to play. He communicated through modified sign language, and I did my best to teach him to be independent, but it wasn't always easy. One day, while my son was playing in the backyard, he kicked his ball over the fence into our neighbor's yard. I was cooking dinner and couldn't keep an eye on him the entire time, but I trusted that he could take care of himself. However, when I went to check on him, I found him in our neighbor's backyard with her screaming at him and calling him a retard. Before I could even reach my son, our neighbor pushed him into her pool. My heart sank as I saw my son struggling to stay afloat, unable to swim properly. I ran to the pool and pulled him out, his head bleeding from hitting the edge of the pool. Karen, as she liked to be called, had already called the police, claiming that my son had trespassed on her property. The police arrived and I explained what had happened. Karen, however, continued to deny that she had pushed my son into the pool. The police officer could see that Karen was in the wrong, and he called for an ambulance to take my son to the hospital. Karen was arrested later on when the police discovered other illegal activities that she was involved in. Months later, we received an update that Karen was now facing multiple charges and had been removed from her position as HOA president. She had also been ordered to pay a hefty fine for violating safety regulations in her backyard, which included having sharp rocks lining the edges of the pool. It turns out that she had a history of harassing and discriminating against neighbors, not just us. However, the consequences for Karen's actions did not end there. In fact, the whole ordeal had left a lasting impact on my son. He became more reserved and hesitant around new people, and I could see that the traumatic experience had affected him deeply. We decided to seek therapy for him to help him cope with the trauma, and it was during one of these sessions that we discovered something shocking. Karen was actually a licensed therapist herself, and her license was now under review due to her actions towards my son. The news was both surprising and devastating. How could someone who was supposed to help people be so cruel to a child? It was clear that Karen had serious issues and that her punishment was well-deserved. Despite everything that had happened, my son and I were grateful for the support we received from other neighbors who were more accepting and empathetic towards us. We continued to keep an even closer eye on him, and we made sure to always stand up for ourselves when facing discrimination. The experience had taught us a valuable lesson about the importance of standing up for what is right and the power of community support. We realized that no one deserves to be treated the way Karen treated us, and that we needed to speak out against discrimination to make a difference. We also decided to get more involved in our local community and participate in events and activities that brought people together. We met other families with children with disabilities and found comfort in the shared experiences and support. As time went by, my son began to regain his confidence and trust in others, and I felt proud of the progress he was making. We had come a long way since that traumatic day, and I was grateful for the lessons we had learned along the way. However, the story did not end there. A few months after Karen's punishment was announced, we received news that she had taken her own life. It was a shocking and sad revelation, and we couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt and responsibility for her death. Despite everything that she had done to us, we couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy towards her. We realized that Karen was a troubled person who needed help, and we regretted not being able to offer her the support she needed. The news of Karen's death was a reminder that we should never underestimate the impact of our actions on others. It was a tragic end to a story that had already taken so many unexpected turns, and it left us with a mix of emotions. In the end, we learned that life can be unpredictable and that we should always strive to be kind and empathetic towards others, no matter how different they may seem. We also learned that the power of community support can make a difference, and that standing up against discrimination is crucial in creating a more inclusive and accepting society. Although the experience was traumatic, we emerged stronger and more united than ever before. We were grateful for the support we received from our community and for the lessons we learned along the way. We knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with strength, resilience, and a commitment to making the world a better place for everyone.
The next story is titled, Entitled Neighbor Threatens Dogs and I Break. Years ago, my mother and I had just moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We had 2 dogs. One was a Bichon Shih Tzu, and the other is a Terrier-Poodle mix. Because of them, we were excited for the community dog park right next to our building. Also, to note, our whole building was filled with dog owners, each with dogs ranging from small to huge. Our apartment was on the first floor in the back of the building, all the way in the corner. It was a nice private area for us with how the apartments were situated. Since one of our dogs is a terrier, he can be a bit barky when we're not home. Though, when we are home, we have a clicker to get his attention, which he has been trained to stop barking and come to whoever has the clicker. Due to our work hours, I was usually home in the morning and Mom was home in the afternoon, leaving him alone for a few hours during the day. After a month of moving to our new apartment, we received a note on our door. It was from one of our neighbors. It stated, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you're new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mom turned in the note right away to the leasing office as she wasn't sure what to do with it. That is when the office told us not to worry because he had done this to every dog owner in the building. They did ask us to see if we can find ways to calm him down when we were not home, so we did. We found out the kids of the neighborhood liked playing with the power station outside our apartment, and that is who he had been barking at. So we closed off that area for him when we went out and no one was home. We started playing calming music as a way to help as well. Another week goes by and this time we hear a knock at the door. We go outside and we meet our angry neighbor. He explains that our dog has kept him up every day and woke him up with his hours of barking. Both of us had been home that day and our dog had been a good boy and had not had excessive barking. I still remember what he had told us when I explained that. I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, then I am going to call animal control and have them both taken from you. I did it before and have no problem getting rid of your dogs too. Then I'll get you kicked out for not following your lease, and I can do that because I'm very rich and the apartment needs my money. So do something to shut your dogs up or else. After that, and my mom apologizing for what had happened, we went back in. A few moments later, I walked out to get the mail and discovered from another neighbor that he had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. After some convincing, my mom told the apartment what had happened. We were told not to worry, and if he did that again, to please contact them. We also found out that the apartment had offered him an apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined since the dogs were the problem and not him. However, with what he had done, my mom began to show signs of anxiety and bought a lemon spray bark collar for our dog. While I didn't like this idea, it had put her at ease to go outside of our apartment. We did make sure to only put it on him when we both were not home. A month went by peacefully, then once again, we got a knock on our door. This time it was animal control. They had gotten an anonymous report of a dog being abused and neglected in our home. They explained that someone has said that our dogs were barking because of neglect. My mom invited the AC lady inside and explained the situation. We showed her everything we could to prevent our dogs from being taken away. The nice lady noticed how playful and happy our dogs were and figured it was another false call. She explained that they had gotten a few of those from an anonymous concerned neighbor for other apartments in this building. The AC lady left, telling us that if they are threatening again to try and get it on record. This event had turned my mom into a paranoid person who became afraid to leave the house, thinking that if she did, then she would lose her pups. Normally, I'm the calmest person in my family, never really letting anyone get to me, but this neighbor had done this to hurt us. So, I did my research and discovered a few things that could legally help us. With new information on certain laws and leasing terms, I formed a plan. During a weekend that my mom was visiting my aunt in a different state, I began my plan. I started it by printing out a few things and then sat outside with my phone and a speaker. I began to play a video of a dog barking really loud. I had figured out which apartment was his thanks to a few neighbors who were also tired of being harassed. I sat there looking across the courtyard to where his apartment was. I waited with a huge smile on my face, and as I hoped for, he stormed out and headed over to where I was. I turned off my video and turned on my recorder without him noticing. His face is red with anger as he looks at me sitting there with a smile. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I ask him. "Duck you," I told you what I will do to your family if you didn't stop your dumb mutt from ruining my sleep. Now I'm going to get them taken from you and get you kicked out for not doing as I said. I gave you a ducking chance. I hope when they take your dogs that they are killed and you and your mom live inside a cardboard box. I give them a fake, oh dear, look and say, so you're saying that I am not allowed to make loud noises, including my dogs barking, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m.? And that I went against the law by doing so? You know you did. And you're telling me this from my porch at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office. Oh noes. That is a very serious threat for my dogs and my family, isn't it? Duck, yes it is. I give him a huge smile and turn off my recorder from my phone. The neighbor is confused now, and I ask him to have a seat. I have a few things to show him. I pull out my papers and hand him the first one. It was the county's noise ordinance laws. In our county, a dog's bark was considered the same amount of sound as a loud appliance, so they can bark between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could talk, I pull out another paper. This one states that it is against the leasing terms to threaten another neighbor, and after one warning that the apartment complex has the right to revolt their lease. He looks at me with an understanding of what he had done now. I silence him and pull out one last paper. This one was another leasing term I had found. This face, after reading this one, had made him turn white. This last one talked about how it was a complete violation of leasing terms to go onto another renter's property and threaten them or their property. This includes the renter's outdoor area. Those found guilty of this violation will have their lease revoked immediately and be forced to leave the apartment within a set time. The scared look on his face was priceless as I silently got up and walked back into my apartment. After he finally left, I called my leasing office and explained what had just happened and agreed to email the recording to them right away. A week later, my mom came home with some news that she had learned from the leasing office. The man had been evicted from his apartment and would be leaving later that week. I found out that my actions had caused the other dog owners of the building to come forward and admit what he had been doing to all of them. After that, there was never another complaint, and I threw away the lemon spray collar. My mom still gets anxiety attacks once in a while, but has been getting help to ease those worries. As for me, I don't regret what I did. I just feel bad that it had to come to this. The last story is titled, My Pregnant Ex Keeps Trying to Move Into My Apartment. This is not my story, this is my friend's story that I'm posting for him because he doesn't have a Reddit and wants people to hear about this. Also for convenience, I'm going to write this in first-person POV because pronouns are hard to keep up with. Everything here is approved by my friend. So I, 21M, have an ex, Angelica, 20F. Angelica and I had an on and off relationship since we were about 15, but got serious when COVID hit, and I had to move back to my hometown. We got an apartment together, and very soon after, she started spending a lot of time with her cousin. Long story short, she's boning her cousin. We break up. We've been broken up 9 months at this point. For 7 of those months, her phone has been on my phone bill, and she owes me over $500. Fine, whatever. I'll never see that $500, and she always makes excuses to not pay me back. That's life, my own fault for letting her keep using me as a cash cow. She also took my car when we broke up, and I let her because I was too afraid she would try to take my apartment too. Anyway, it's 9 months past our breakup. I get a message. Hey, I'm pregnant. I'm on my way home from work, so I don't respond. That is 9 months past being my problem. It is not my baby. She messages me again. My boyfriend, the one she cheated on me with, and I have nowhere to stay. Still 9 months past my problem. Angelica has never worked a day in her life. She lives off the disability check from her boyfriend and spends it 99% on weed and fast food. She never paid rent and is documented to never pay rent. Anyway, she tells me my name is still on the lease. We're going to move in September. I tell her, your name is not on the lease. It was renewed last month and I took your name off. I'm sorry. She messages me calling me an asshole and saying she's moving in because she has nowhere for her baby and 3 dogs to stay. Mind you, my apartment is more like a studio and barely fits me, let alone 2 other people and 3 dogs. I tell her it's not happening. I'm moving out of town soon anyway. Also, come pick up her crap that she's left at my apartment for 9 months. She says no, and if I throw it away, she's going to press charges. I tell her it doesn't matter because when I move, I'm throwing it away. She later called my landlord and told him I was planning to move out. I got upset at this and told her I ran the numbers on the car, it's still in my name. Get the car out of my name now or I'm repossessing it, or she can leave me the duck alone. She started bawling on a call asking how I could do this to her and her unborn child, and I was condemning her and her child to be homeless. She also still has a gun in my name that I told her to give back or I'm calling the cops. I'm really considering repossessing the car since it was mine from the start and is still in my name. She doesn't deserve to get a free car handed to her. She needs to wake up. She keeps saying she needs a place to stay. I'm ruining her and her baby's life. It's literally my apartment that she has never once paid rent on. I don't know how she thinks she's entitled to just live in my apartment with the guy she cheated on me with and 3 dogs. I hope the baby ends up okay. It's not its fault its mother is a spoiled brat, but I also hope being homeless and carless wakes her the duck up. Tiny update, my friend said his ex is coming to pick up her crap tomorrow and return the gun. If he gets shot, I'll let you guys know, I guess. Update, her and her boyfriend, fake cousin, came to his, my friend's, apartment, returned the gun, and picked up her crap. Her boyfriend then proceeded to wave his own gun around and demand to be put back on the lease. Not how that works. My friend called the cops, they booked it out of there before the cops arrived. I'm not sure about the rest. Final update, phone is not on the phone bill, her stuff is out of his apartment, his gun is returned, dog is in his possession, still no car. He said it's not worth it at this point. My friend asked for no charges, so I doubt anything will happen. He said he's cutting her out of his life, no contact. I'm personally upset about the car, but nothing to do about it now. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.